Charlie, how are you?
I'm doing great. How you doing?
I'm doing all right. Thanks for taking the time. It's always awesome to connect.
Very
Um,
fun. Yeah.
but before we hit record, it's one of those things like I don't know if this is an outcome of the COVID times or whatnot, but we've never met in person. But I feel like
No,
we've known
I'm
each other
not
for
convinced you exist in real life.
I'm we are just AI bots on screen that talk to each other.
Obviously V1 in my case. Maybe you might be the V2, but yeah.
Awesome. Very So let's before we hop in, I wanna let you introduce yourself to our
Yeah.
audience, and give us a little bit of your background, how you got to where you are, your inspirations, all that sort of fun stuff, and then we can go from there.
Great. Yeah. So I'm Charlie Melichar. I run my own consulting firm, Melichar Consulting. I do, work primarily in the advancement space with colleges, universities, healthcare systems, cultural organizations, looking to raise money to do great things for people. I mean, that's what it kind of boils down to. So we do campaign planning, campaign work, and then just overall advancement program and fundraising program support because campaigns are great and important, but these organizations do great and important things outside of campaigns. So really helping figure out how's the program functioning, how are people performing in their jobs, and how's your message resonating, and ultimately are people picking up what you're putting down? Are they excited about your mission and your vision, and do they want to be a part of it through philanthropic support and engagement? So that's what I do. How I got to do that was just kind of like everyone, it's a bit of a journey. I started off in thinking I was going to go into radio, then thinking I was going to go into journalism, then deciding to go into PR. And then PR got me into higher education, and that's where I kind of sat for most of my career, working at UMBC in Baltimore, then Colgate University in New York, then ultimately Vanderbilt University, which is here in Nashville, and where I've been since 2010. So yeah, that's me.
Wow. So tell me about this desire to get into radio because we're on a podcast now, which is kind of
Yeah,
different from
yeah,
radio, right? So you do kind of have a voice for radio for whatever that.
yeah. I've been
I
told
have
the
a face.
opposite,
I have
but
a face for radio, but what was that your original genesis for wanting to do that?
yeah, I got into the college radio station. I was like, this is it, man. This is what I'm gonna do. And then I was, general manager of the radio station, was on air, did my internships in the summer in radio, and came back to my internship after a semester for the summer and opened the door to the room where I did a lot of my work. And there were literally machines where I used to sit, at the computers that were set up to do the work that I had been doing. And it was kind of like this, oh my gosh. And they said, well, we don't need you to do that anymore because it's been automated. I was like, oh, they shifted me over to something else. And I used to pull commercials and stuff like that. I'm trying not to say too much about how old I might be, but pull commercial spots and all that. And then they said, no, 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 that's on the machine. I was like, oh. So eventually it took hold that maybe there won't be a job for me at some point. So I started to slide away from radio. I still, I love it and loved it. Um, but it moved more towards journalism. And then really journalism, that dream was short-lived because the journalism professor that I attached myself to was just, as soon as I said that, he said, oh gosh, just go into PR. He said, you'll end up there anyway, so just do it now. All right. So that's how I ended up in PR, which kind of led to everything else.
That's awesome. So you were like the original person who was replaced by AI,
I
essentially.
felt so. I felt like it. It felt like it. Yeah.
That's amazing. So we'll probably find some parallels to that
Yeah.
towards
Yeah.
the middle of the conversation when we talk about people and their roles and their
Sure.
work. You were literally replaced by a machine, whereas people are concerned about being replaced by software, right? And
Yeah.
I think that there's definitely parallels that will
Hmm.
there. It's interesting about the journalism piece because I think that my story I worked for the high school newspaper. I was a
Yeah.
sports writer and all that sort of stuff. My favorite part was my last ever article that I contributed was on the front page of the sports section. That was the first
That's
time I
awesome.
ever got there, which was great. This is how I peaked in high school clearly but then you go, I went to college, joined the newspaper, and was the business manager selling ads and all that
There
sort
you
of
go.
stuff. And so then I got into marketing, right? And so
Hmm. Hmm.
getting into marketing, getting into PR, I applaud the work that true journalists
Oh
do.
yeah.
But there's all these other elements that are kind of tied into that
Oh
that
yeah. Well, it's all
ecosystem.
training, right? I mean, what you learned from doing those jobs and what I learned from radio. I mean, you learn a lot about how to talk, just talk, right? When you're in
Mhm.
radio, because you're usually in a room by yourself talking to nobody, and you might actually be talking to a couple, or thousands of people, and you don't have that immediate feedback, right? So you kind of have
Mhm.
to learn how to know what you're going to say and know what you want to talk about and keep yourself entertained for a
Yeah.
little bit.
Well, it's the old day webinar, right? Like
Yeah.
if you think about that experience, and I remember in one of the and for the listening and the YouTube viewing audience, one of the ways Charlie and I got connected was I was working at a company that hosted virtual events and virtual
Yeah.
content, and during the height of COVID, those types of companies saw a lot of growth because there were no other in-person
Yeah.
options, right? And one of the biggest points of contention for admissions officers, which I would assume is a similar type of feedback from advancement professionals and communications professionals, is the people who are really good at presenting to audiences, say at a event on campus or an event off campus, were the ones that really struggled. Many of them, I shouldn't say all of them, many of them struggled with doing
Mhm.
it virtually because
Sure.
they thirst for that interaction. They want
Yeah.
that type of just in time feedback that you don't get from a webinar, and you surely don't get when
That's
you're
right.
hosting a radio show.
Well, it's also, if you think back, it was kind of a proxy. Like before it was necessary, it was just hey, this is kind of, there's some technology out there. I mean, we weren't Zooming all the time back, before we were Zooming all the time. So you could work around the inefficiencies, and you could work around this is actually what we do now of it. And I think you're right. I think it did take people a minute to think about, what do you really want to, can you reasonably accomplish in this format? How do you connect to people? How do you think about lighting? Like all that,
Yeah.
from big stuff to little stuff. It's not been that long, but it's been actually, a few years now that people have had track record of how to figure out how to do this right. I'm pretty sure we're not there yet.
Yeah, well, and I think the people who had a head start were the people who have done these types of things prior. Right? I was doing webinars for years before
Yeah.
COVID. Right, and
Right.
many people were. I'm not going to say I was like the
Oh
pioneer
yeah.
webinar, but there were a lot of a lot of people who had never done that. I told the story last week to a friend about podcasting. Like I was I was doing a podcast with my one of my former bosses at a college that I worked with, and we were like,
Mhm.
this is when we were diving into every social network and we want to be on every digital channel. I was like, why don't we do a podcast where the admissions VP talks about what kids should be doing to prepare for their college search? We thought that was a great way to add value to the conversation. And it was interesting because this is the guy that you put him in an auditorium with 900 people, totally fine,
Yeah.
crack jokes, having a great time. Put them in front of a microphone to record a podcast, which you can edit all of it later before it even goes live, sweating bullets, right? Totally nervous. And so it's interesting to kind of think about
Yeah.
the places people are comfortable and
Totally.
knowing where to put people.
Yeah. It's true. It's true.
So that's a great intro, and I've learned so much about your radio. I didn't know about the radio background. That's
Yeah.
amazing
Yeah.
to me. So what we'll do is we'll take a quick break, and we will when we come back, what we will end up diving into is probably something very related to what we just kind of started touching on, which are kind of some of the challenges that advancement professionals specifically are facing during these times. And I think we can talk about AI, we can talk about digital media, we can talk about a lot of things. But we will take a break and we will be right back.
Sounds great.
Thoughtfully nurture applicants, personalize retention efforts, and exceed fundraising goals with our Cadence Engagement Platform's text messaging solutions. Designed exclusively for higher ed by higher ed professionals, Cadence helps you engage your audiences with the perfect balance of AI and personal connection. We leverage an intuitively designed interface and easy-to-use texting templates so you can have targeted conversations or scale up to expand your reach. Our powerful smart messaging can respond automatically, exactly how you would. And to measure progress, track your campaigns with unparalleled reports and analytics. Effectively meet your community where they are as we proudly feature an industry-leading 95% read rate within 3 minutes. It's never been easier to make every message count.
All right, welcome back to FYI, the For Your Institution podcast. I'm here with Charlie Melichar of Melichar Consulting, and we are about to dive into a branch from the conversation we were just having around kind of the challenges that advancement professionals might be facing right now with regards to advancements in technology. And, Charlie shared a great story about he was replaced by technology back in the day. And now we've had a lot of conversations here on the podcast and all over the internet about advancements in technology and how people are concerned, not necessarily now for their jobs, but how it's going to impact their jobs. So Charlie, I'd love for you to kind of give just kind of your off the cuff reaction to that type of a commentary, right, where people are trying to find the best ways to leverage technology in their day to day. And I'll give you one example that recently we had Dave Marshall, who's the founder and CEO of Mongoose, on the podcast. And we were talking about how technology the irony of how technology actually can facilitate better human interactions and better connections. But a lot of those conversations have been, in higher education at least, I feel like, have been really centered around student recruitment and retention, right? And I think that there's a gap in the conversation that we have to have more, which is how can we apply those lessons in the advancement world? And so I'd love for you to kind of noodle on that and let me know what you think.
Yeah. Well, I mean, just jumping right off of that point, that's what I am most optimistic about, that if you can use technology, and it doesn't have to just be outward facing, but even the technology you have to just do the day-to-day of the job, if you can leverage that to make more time for people stuff, that's good, right? Because these are people to people, one-to-one or one-to-few or even one-to-many opportunities for people to get together, whether it's around missions or advancement, engagement. That's great. So the degree to which technology facilitates human-to-human interaction, that's a win. I think some of the problems we face are pacing. Things are changing very quickly. Higher education in particular, it takes a while to make things happen, to implement things. So the incubation time from that's a great idea to now we're using it and fully kind of fluent and how best to use it can take a while. And sometimes the technology changes under our feet. So how are places being thoughtful about which technologies are enhancing, which ones are really doing the work they need to do, and which ones might be adding to workload, adding to kind of just overall kind of the burden on the people and taking them away from the people stuff, right? So I think sometimes you see places that acquire technologies and they spend so much time selecting, onboarding, training, that ultimately was the juice worth the squeeze, right? Are you doing more of the right work, or did we kind of add more burden? I think that's one of the challenges. One of the other ones I see is embedded in that last comment are just around not the people-to-people connections that we're charged to make as advancement professionals, but also how are we using technology to support people internally? And are they properly trained? Do they have the resources to be successful using whatever technology it is? And is it recognized as an enhancer, or is it kind of taken off the ball? So those are a handful of things that I think are, can be in our way. But like I said, I'm really optimistic about ways that we can be using some, really any technology, but some, new platforms and emerging platforms to do great things for advancement programs and for their institutions. But it can get really noisy, right? It can get noisy in terms of everything that's available, what the best practices are, what the ways to use these things properly are. And there could be uneven levels of adoption and, again, kind of fluency within the organization that just make it clunky. And nobody loves clunky.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. Nobody loves clunky, but they also are super comfortable with the status quo, right? And if clunky is the status quo, then and a lot of times we deal with clunky, and that's right. That can be from the guy who's worked in ed tech for 20 years now. Like that's the frustrating piece, right? And I know one of the things we've talked about for past couple of years is this challenge of, there's desire for everything to be integrated, but
Yeah.
you don't want to invest in one larger thing. We'd rather work with 5 or
Yeah.
6 small things, right? And especially in the advancement world, I feel like there's opportunities for efficiency where, like you're saying, is the juice worth the squeeze when we have to log into 4 different platforms to be able to do one, to be able to truly engage with one donor, or to better respond or better reach out to one alum about getting involved, right? I think there's a lot of opportunity there to become more efficient by, dare I say, consolidating some of those investments. And
Yeah.
I love your thoughts on kind of the time people are spending with
Yeah.
different things, because I think that brings us to the kind of the different sections of the fundraising pyramid, so to speak, right? I know there's, obviously you've got your large base of recent alumni who don't necessarily make a lot of money, that aren't going to be giving, but they want to be involved in some way. And then you've got the super tippy top, which are the people who are getting ready to write the institutions into their wills, and they're super high touch. But there's this giant group in the middle that, if you could get them to add a zero to their $50 check to send $500 instead, that would be a huge impact on the outcomes of the fundraising campaign, or of the annual fund, or whatever the effort is. But I think a lot of it's we cannot get out of our own way.
Yeah. And if you look at how programs are built to interact with, engage, manage, whatever you want to call it, folks up and down that pyramid, I mean, typically you have individuals responsible for individual relationships, communications, engagement at the higher end. And then obviously for efficiency purposes, we're kind of communicating in more of a mass way as we get further down. I think one of the things, and it makes me skeptical a little bit about, about where we could go with as technologies advance. A lot of times there's a problem. We do know these folks, right? They're not, I mean, if they're alumni, they've experienced the institution. Many of them have interacted in some way. They've had some kind of engagement. But we still tend to see folks spoken to as kind of a bit of an amorphous blob, right?
Yeah.
And you get that, right? I mean, you and we have alumni experiences. I'm not sure what yours is like. I'm not, not talking about what mine is like, but I think a lot of people would say that generally, maybe I don't get a whole lot. And when I get it, it feels pretty standard. So that's at the base, and that tends to run up all the way through that middle even that you're talking about of, before you ask me to do something, you should probably reflect that you know me and why you're asking me to do that thing. Is it just because you need a certain amount of revenue each year and you're counting on alumni to be responsible for that? Well, that doesn't sound great to me, right? But if you can use some, really not sophisticated technology to get some of that right, I think it creates opportunities to use more sophisticated technology to do other things. But I still think, I mean, to your point about all the platforms and everything, I still think there's work to be done to not just do targeted marketing or kind of use fields to enter, Gil's name or whatever. It's more of a reflecting that, we see you, we care about what you care about, and there are things that we'd love to see you get involved.
Yeah.
And simple as that seems, as base level as that seems, there still are some problems up and down on that. So giving people a sense that, there's not just an opportunity to invest more, but there's an opportunity to just feel more a part of the institution. And that doesn't have to be all person to person. Sometimes you can use, the people to manage the systems to make it possible for someone to see themselves in it. And then that leads itself into something else. So I think technology can help tremendously, especially like you're saying at that mid-level point, because a lot of those folks who end up in that middle of the pyramid have some level of capacity to both do more, and they probably have raised their hand at some point and say, yeah, I kind of care about what you guys are doing. But if they keep getting tossed into the general pool, eventually they might swim away, right?
Yeah, and that goes to the point like that I've heard numerous times over the past few months is around personalization, right? And personalization is not just dear first name, right? That personalization is more about the right message after the interaction, right? And making it so that they're I go to the recruitment world with this, right? Where it's like, you know, my name is Gil, and you know that I've expressed interest in the marine biology program, right? And so sending me a letter saying, "Dear Gil, here's information about the marine biology program," that was personalization at some point 10, 15 years ago. That was the level that we were capable of at
Yeah.
best. Yet we still send dear student letters, right?
Yeah.
And so there's
Yeah,
still
yeah, yeah.
there's still issues that with that, and I think it's the same in the advancement side where we know what if the college knows it. I would hope my alma mater knows my name, and I would hope that
Yeah.
they know what I graduated with, right? They should have a record of that somewhere. But to send me a letter and just say, "Hey, we would love to update you on what's been going on in the business school," right? Like that's different than knowing that I was on the website a week ago and inviting me to an event that features a professor who I adored when I went there, right? Like there's an opportunity to be better when it comes to what
So that
personalization
what you
really
just
is.
talked about, though, I think that, and this isn't a technology issue. This is a culture or practice or behavior issue, whatever it is that makes sense, right? Saying, "Hey, Gil, we know you care about Professor Johnson from the marine biology program. We're doing an event nearby. We'd love for you to come to it." Great program, great offering and everything. The truth is maybe 30 people really care about that. 50 people really care about that, and maybe 16 might come. When places put on events, there tends to be maybe they start with that recognition, but then as the list gets built and they think about the program and, oh gosh, we're asking them to travel out there and we already got the catering and everything, invite everyone within 100 miles. And that's where things, I mean, that then does manifest itself in technology, but there can be this sense of, well, everybody should know, or we should invite everybody. And if you took a minute and looked at everybody's past behaviors, most of them have no chance of going, right? So,
Yeah.
and you make all these arguments about, well, if they don't know, they won't go. Well, we did that like 30 times already with Gil, and he's never shown up. So we
Right.
probably over invited him, right? And also he had he majored in dance. So well, I don't even know why we're asking him. And that's what, again, that's not really a technology thing, but it's I don't know what it is, if it's fear or if it's kind of the sense that everybody should know, right? But if they've already shown some sense of like, they might really care about one thing, but they mostly don't care about everything else, just give them that one thing.
Yeah.
And the technology does its best work when you start to do that, right? If you have internal practices about, we know who our market is, we know what our market cares about, and we know kind of how they might be activated, technology is ready to rock. But if you give it just kind of lumpy data,
Yep.
you're going to end up saying, well, that platform didn't do what I wanted, so I'm going to switch to this one, which is going to do the exact same thing.
Yeah.
Just see this a lot, right? It's about this sense of engagement, which is a great word, but I think it gets misused a bit sometimes that, engagement feels good, but there are a lot of things about it that can be hard, right? Engagement isn't just, I want you to engage with me so I could do something, right? Engagement is like a two-way street.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
conversation. Do you want to have a conversation with these people, right? As an organization, is this everyone? And do they want to have a conversation with you? Both answers might be no, right? So I think having honest conversations about what do you mean by engagement? Who are you trying to activate? And do any of them show signs that they want to engage back?
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
think that all of those conversations at a high level really help you dial in how the technology can do its best work for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love how during this podcast, I went from being a business major to a marine biology major to a dance major.
Oh, we're not done yet. We're not done yet.
And that's fine. I mean, now I work in podcasting, so there we go.
Right.
So I do want to point out I want to drive home that point around the better communication and thinking more clearly about what message gets sent to whom, right? And I think I look at like case studies when people buy a new CRM platform. They say, "Oh, our yield rate went up by X%, or we had better response rate by Y% or whatever." And I always kind of chuckle because I say, well, the reason why is because building that new communication flow in that new CRM is probably the first time you've looked at your comp flow 8 years ago when you built your old CRM, right? And so I think there's a certain need for more proactive evaluation of that type of content on a regular cadence. And I know it's easier said than done, but it really should be done, right?
Yeah.
It's doing the good work to make sure that our targeting remains true, because if it does, if I invite everybody within a 100-mile radius, or I invite the 35 people in the area, and either way 17 people show up, something tells me I should have just gone with the more targeted approach.
That's right. Well, and all logic, I mean, none of this is like mind-boggling, right? Like we're not saying things right now that would blow people's minds, but again, they're either institutional cultures or a sense of we have to generate audience for this thing, which of course is true. But that doesn't mean now invite 600 people, because the same ones who are going to show up to the targeted list are probably going to show up, or maybe you catch a couple here and there, but that's not really,
Yeah. At what
that's
cost?
not a great, right. At what cost, both in terms of, internal cost, and what cost in terms of you're just bludgeoning people with stuff and just showing them again and again and again that you don't know them, going back to that original point. I totally agree about that the process enhances the products. But if you just kind of, it's like anything, right? If you practice every day, by the time it's game day, you're gonna perform better. But if you just show up to the game, if you just use the system at kind of point of send, it's probably not going to really do much great work for you.
That's it. And now I need you to give a pep talk to my son about his hockey practice time. Same thing. Awesome. Well, that is, I mean, obviously I've covered a lot there. And like you said, I feel like a lot of these conversations are always, we're not doing earth-shattering, groundbreaking revelations. What we are is reinforcing common sense and reinforcing that, I get it. There are people, we're under pressures every day to increase reach. We're under pressures every day to increase outcomes. But if you get one or two more people to show up to an event, but you turn off 99% of those 600 people that you invite, is it worth it? And some people will say, well, I got those two people to come.
That's right.
But long term, is it worth it?
Well, there's also opportunity costs in there too, right? Of kind of if we're really honest with ourselves about the people who are really good prospects, then we'll be more honest with ourselves about, okay, who are the next ones, the ones after that, right? And then how do we spend some time, maybe some dollars, a little bit of research or whatever it is, to get to know our people better? Because again, we're talking about engagement, and engagement isn't just the easy engagement or the people who know you and like you. It's harder engagement of the people who know you and maybe sort of like you, or don't really know you and might like you, but kind of doing the same things with the same groups with the expectations to have better or different outcomes just won't work, right? It just doesn't work. So how do we kind of peel that back? Just be honest that we're not doing anything wrong here, but there's opportunity out there we're just missing because we've limited our bandwidth, or we've not taken the time to understand why they're not, why they're not engaging, why they're not responding, why they're not whatever. And it's probably because we just don't know them. We don't know them as well as we know the people who have said, I like you, I want to be a part of what you're doing. We're expecting other people to do that just because other people do it.
Yep.
That's not how it works.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to take another break. And when we come back, I want to build on that and talk about kind of the future and how we can better serve people by getting to know them better, and what ways we can get them to know us better so that we can then know them better, and vice versa, right? So we will take a break and we will be right back.
Discover future applicants, delight enrolled students, and amplify fundraising performance with our Cadence engagement platform's live chat and chatbot solutions. Designed exclusively for higher ed by higher ed professionals, Cadence helps you engage your audiences with the perfect balance of AI and personal connection. We leverage proactive outreach and anticipate common roadblocks, knowing the most significant decisions often start with the smallest conversations. Our powerful AI ensures instant support and is smart enough to know exactly when to hand off to a staff member. And if nobody is available, it allows for easy follow-up. Effortlessly integrated with your website, we proudly feature an industry-leading 85% self-service rate. It's never been easier to make every message count.
All right, welcome back to FYI. We are here with Charlie Melichar of Melichar Consulting, talking about a number of things. One, inspiring my son to practice more at hockey. Two, we need to all get back into radio broadcasting. And three, and almost probably most importantly, doing a better job of informing our use of technology to keep our audiences engaged and help to demonstrate that we know them, right? And so in so doing, getting better results from our outreach, right? And so Charlie, we were just talking about that was a very long way to just kind of get to the areas where we were just talking about, which is, we have these great technology platforms and these great tools at our disposal, but a lot of times, the tool is only as good as the prompts that we give it. You think about ChatGPT as a good example here, right? Like when you give a bad prompt, you're going to get a bad response. If you give a really thoughtful prompt, you get a really thoughtful response. And so when we use technology, it's very similar, right? If we're not using targeting well, if we're not using the personalized fields well, if we're not using a good cadence, we're not going to get good outcomes from our campaigns. And I love your thoughts on tangible and tactical things that people could do to be better, right? To get better results, thus creating a better experience for our audiences.
Yeah. Well, I think, I going back, it starts again outside of technology, right? So what are we trying to achieve? Who can help us get there? And what are we asking of them? Some of the basics of, from a fundraising standpoint, what are the goals we're pursuing and the messaging that wraps around it? Then who actually are we talking to? And that could be from a one-to-one standpoint, but it also could be to more of a larger market with segments. But what is it we're asking of them? And then how do we make sure we've kind of earned that ask? And is there more that has to be done before it? And that gets you into, how we're doing our storytelling and everything that tees up that right to ask somebody to do something. I think the technologies that we use sometimes we don't think of them all together, kind of like you're saying before, that, we have storytelling platforms over here, we got the website over here, we got social media, and then we got really an ecosystem that helps us convey, institutional ambitions, kind of what some of the opportunities to be involved are, so that by the time it's the moment to reach out to folks, there's some sense of understanding there of kind of where the institution's going, right? So this is what we're about. These are the big ideas. And then here's your chance to be a part of it. Here's an opportunity that, because we know you as a animal husbandry major, that Gil, that, we were asking you to be a part of this. So I think it's kind of a long way of saying, I think the technology, again, is kind of a facilitator of that point of engagement. And the ways that we can best use it is by doing our homework first around all the other things. Like, so why is it? Is it because this is the way we usually do it and we usually use this thing to do it? Or is there an opportunity or in a segment that we know really well or know about that we need to kind of provide this opportunity to? And is that really the best way to get them into them? Is it whatever? Is it our email platform? Is it our social media program? Is it text? Whatever it is, that tool will only perform as well as, like you said, that tool will only perform as well as what we feed it, right? So if we feed it a bad list with kind of clunky content, even if it's well written, but the content isn't kind of on point and honed,
Yep.
You're not going to get a great return from it. So I think it's everything that leads up to the point of which you start pressing keys and buttons and all that kind of stuff, turning knobs, because I have to turn knobs on my computer every morning. That is going to just make for a more successful outcome. And again, it's going to feel better to the people on the other side. What feels weird often to folks on the inside, on staff, is that your lists are smaller. Your messaging might be more honed. It can feel like less, but it's way more focused and targeted.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll point out, you did not say touch a screen when you talked.
I did not.
With technology. So for those who are questioning age groups, there we go.
I think I've already taken care of that.
Yeah. We already opened the conversation with, you were replaced at a radio station by technology. Yeah. So I think we're good. Were you also one of those people in the basement helping connect phone lines to each other? Is that
not gonna respond to that?
So I mean, I think it boils down to, and this will be the Mallory Wilsey shout out of the podcast, which
Yeah.
is, she always says, goals before tools, right? And I think that at the end of the day, as you said, you could have the greatest, CRM platform, you could have the greatest text messaging platform, you could have the greatest social media monitoring software.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter if you don't have clear guidance on what your objectives are. And
Yeah.
I think for so long it's been in higher ed, it's definitely more pronounced. I've seen it at many institutions. It's chasing the shiny toy, right? And or not liking the outcomes from the latest shiny toy, so jumping to the next shiny
That's
toy,
right.
jumping to the next consulting firm, or jumping to the next. And I think that we need to be more thoughtful about what our goals are, and and like you said, maybe we're working with smaller lists, but you know what? If I called 100 people, if I'm a development officer and I'm calling 100 people, and one out of every 10 tell me that they want to give versus 10 out of every 10, I'll take that smaller list that's 10 of 10 every single time,
Yeah.
over this larger list, and continually hitting a bunch of no's.
Yeah. 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 And a lot of it is, again, remembering that we're trying to get to productivity results. Like, we want to make something happen, whether it's, whether it's an event or it's giving, or what are those goals? And activity is not a goal, right? Being busy isn't a goal. Sending 600 emails per month isn't a goal. Having 300 events a year isn't a goal. All those things are means to an end. So it can feel good. It's like the Costanza effect, where if you look really busy, maybe that feels productive, but is that actually benefiting the organization? Or can you make fewer efforts to get either the same or more outcomes? That sounds even better. But again, a lot of this is just, it can be habit breaking. And it's very easy for me to say because I'm a consultant and I'm on the outside and I don't have to run into that. But I think, folks like you, folks like me, we can kind of point to it and say, there's another way, and then maybe give some confidence, give some kind of guidance on how to get from here to there. But I think, like you said, just depending on either whether it's a tool or a report or whatever to kind of fix the problem isn't getting to kind of some of those fundamentals. And again, it doesn't make good use of that cost of time and cost of kind of purchase on whatever technology that you're using.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I'll throw out my final points and I'll let you respond. It comes to the matter of, there's two phrases that I've kind of coined to the point of being cliche, hopefully at this point, which is there's certainly comfort in redundancy, right? And I mean that from the point of, we do the things that keep us busy because it's the way it's the way things always been done, kind of an approach. But there's definitely a certain level of comfort with doing those remedial tasks over and over again, because it feels like I'm doing something. It feels like I'm putting effort forward, right? And I think that's something that is definitely permeated in the culture of higher education. And the other is, presence equals value, right? And just you're in the office, even if you're just sitting in your chair or spinning in a circle for the last 2 hours of the day, you're there, right? You're in the office and you're present, which is an item that has been, at higher ed, it's definitely held on to pre and post COVID, is kind of making sure that, people are there. And obviously there's been some flexibility now in a post COVID world, but there's still definitely almost an over indexing on being present in the office versus, being out or in doing the work. So I'd love your thoughts on those two kind of statements.
Yeah. I mean, I think on the first one, there's a certain band of kind of, it's year over year, it's baseline work. It doesn't need to be super exciting, but it's important, that I think sometimes gets it's not even overvalued. It's just too much time gets spent on it. It's like the easy things need to be easy. So what is that band of productive activities that aren't the most exciting, but they work? How do we make sure we spend as little time as humanly possible on them? And that's a great place to insert technology, because they kind of Like they just work. You have to make sure you're paying attention so that they're still working and that they're functional and effective and efficient, all that kind of stuff. But let's spend as little time as humanly possible on that because they don't need to be reinvented each year, which creates bandwidth for that next level of work that maybe is experimenting more. Maybe it goes back to something we were talking about before. It's time spent studying those untapped or kind of under leveraged markets that we have. So some of that bandwidth gets cannibalized by spending too much time here. And then on top of that, it's the real kind of the high value work that usually the time does get protected for that, but it's that middle piece that I think we can find some ways to make better use out of. We could spend days on ends talking about the presence's productivity piece. And I think one of the things is, what does productivity look like? And so are we clear on how people's work is being valued and measured and where it's most effective to do that work? I'm a believer in the human to human piece. I think we haven't figured that out yet in terms of balance of kind of showing up versus being present for the job. One of the things I've been thinking about more lately, which is maybe a little bit off topic on the balance of kind of in office, out of office, is as we're thinking about newer employees, whether they're newer to the workforce or newer to the organization, how do we make sure that we're not just making sure they're productive or making sure that they're kind of doing the right things for the job? Are we offering them mentoring and growth opportunities? Because a lot of that happens in the margins, right? A lot of that happens kind of in a traditional in-office environment. It kind of happened around the edges of a meeting or around the edges of kind of an event, whatever it was. So our place is really thinking about how they grow their people outside of, Gil is a top performer, which is great. And maybe that's enough. But are we also thinking about Gil's growth in the organization, Gil's growth as a professional? I'm not sure what that looks like yet, but I'd love to hear more conversations about that versus what's the right number of days in the office, because I don't know what to do with that. It could be all of them or it could be none of them.
Right.
But if the only measure is, are they doing the job? I kind of feel like we're missing something on behalf of the person, right? Like, but I don't know what that could or should look like, but it's something I'm eager to, see folks talk more about.
And how does Gil put his underwater basket weaving degree to right? That's the most important.
Bring it full circle. I like it.
Awesome. Well, I'll start a radio show about underwater basket weaving, and
nice.
you be my producer. So
I'm in.
Charlie, thank you so much for all of the time.
This is fun.
And for anyone who wants to get in touch with you, what are the best ways to be able to do that?
LinkedIn is my favorite. So yeah, you can find me there at Melichar. You can find me kind of anywhere at Melichar, but that's the top place to connect.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much again. And we will see you all next time on FYI.